I'm Melissa Lane, and welcome to the LifeKraft Podcast. LifeKraft is passionate about helping you live your everyday life better by sharing inspiration, awareness, and tools to enable you to create a fulfilling life. On today's episode of the LifeKraft Podcast, we have Lisa Welsh. Lisa is a self-proclaimed sex geek and pleasure educator who teaches us that pleasure is the fuel that you've been looking for to help you handle your overwhelmingly busy life. In this episode, Lisa shares valuable insights on how to create more confidence, how to start allowing pleasure into your everyday life, how pleasure can help you live a more elevated, vibrant life. She shares about her own journey to reclaiming her sexuality, how stress affects your desire for pleasure, and so much more. Remember, we love hearing from you, so tag at the LifeKraft and tag our guest at It's Lisa Welsh and share your biggest takeaway from this episode with us on social media. Are you ready to be inspired? Then enjoy the episode. Lisa, welcome to the LifeKraft Podcast. I'm so happy to have you on here. You've been such an inspiration in my life, and I know our audience is going to love you tremendously because you bring such a spark and so much fun to a lot of serious topics. So thank you for being here.
Oh, Melissa, thank you. It is such a pleasure to be on your podcast. I'm a big fan of you and your podcast. So yay, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited too. I want to jump in with a big question because I think we learn so much about someone's life when you answer this question. So, Lisa, what was one of your biggest failures and what did it teach you?
Oh, it's such a big question. And I think, to be honest, I would have to say my first marriage. And it's such a shame. And although I was the one who eventually walked away from the marriage, it was an incredibly sad thing, and it's taught me so much. I think the biggest thing it taught me was the importance of being myself, because I was trying very hard to be the perfect wife that I thought I needed to be and fit this role that I'd created in my mind, that it nearly destroyed me. So
wow.
Yeah, that was a big failure that still hurts every now and again. And I'm married happily again now, but yes, that has to be my biggest failure.
Why do you think we go onto the path, especially when it comes to relationships, you having gone through it already, where we get to a point where we lose ourselves to keep a partner, or we lose our identity to become the perfect wife, the perfect partner, the perfect mom? How does that happen, and how can we start breaking out of that, just in your own opinion?
I think it's 100% down to trying to be safe, trying to do what feels safe because it feels like you will belong. For me personally, that's exactly how it played out. Like, I had a very challenging childhood, and my first husband was the perfect rock that I needed. And which is why I feel that it was my failure, a lot of it, because I needed him to be secure and stable, and our life was pretty regimented. And I fit that role because I felt it was the safest place for me. I felt like I had a place to be. I didn't have family support. I wasn't ready to trust my own rock for support, right? So I tried to fit into that picture so that I could be safe and belong there.
Wow. You grew up in England, right? And how was your journey getting here? And what sparked the fire to become a coach where you teach people about pleasure and confidence and all of these amazing things?
So it was an interesting journey to get here. I never in my whole life would have imagined I would leave England, let alone settle in another hemisphere.
Well, you chose a good one.
I did. I'm very happy here. It's been almost 8 years. I left for love. I had a long distance relationship from Durban to London, and it just was exciting to come to tropical climate and a new family, because at that point at the point that I left, I didn't have a support structure in England. And I mean, at that point, I had learned to trust myself enough that I knew I could, create a life and be happy. And so I felt like I could go there and be me fully without people's expectations. Like I was a newly formed little human that was just healed, freshly healed. And it felt like a great time to actually move so that no one could judge me and say, no, that's not you. Because I'm like, no, this is me. This is me. I'm going to like test out my wings over here now, when nobody knows me.
That is so funny. That's exactly what I did too. That's exactly what I did. When I went on that healing journey, first thing I did was move. And it was so great to have no one know who you are and just experience you for who you chose to be in that moment. So powerful.
Right. It gives you confidence to try it out without having to hold on to that identity that people expect you to be, right? And then choosing coaching, can I say it chose me? I bet you're the same.
Yeah.
I feel like I've always been a coach since I was a kid. And I essentially did the qualification so that I had that to say I was qualified. But even the qualification didn't change a thing about what I do. I just do me, and I've always done it. It's very, very natural.
Tell us a little bit more about how you help women, because I'd love for you to explain what you do, because it's brilliant. You can read it on the website, but when she explains it, it just sparks that fire within you that you're like, yes, we need more of that.
So I help women to just find that passion and fire within them. Or you can say I help women to get the permission to experience pleasure, essentially. And I am just like them. I'm a normal woman, a busy woman, a woman who's had all of the conditioning and societal expectations. I'm a woman that totally neglected myself for a very long time, to the point almost of destruction. And I crawled my way out of the pit. So I want to teach other women to do it, because when you give yourself permission to access pleasure, you can light yourself up and serve those around you that you love with so much more. You can be a better mom, a better wife. You don't have to follow the rules of being a better mom. You just are one, because you're a more full human. You've reached your, I don't say I've reached my full potential. That's a bit extravagant, but I mean, I feel at home with who I am in any moment. And that's through the power of pleasure. That's what I want to teach other women. And that's what I teach.
I want to dig into that, because as you said, you had to crawl out of that pit to get to where you are now, to understanding all of these things. There's so much to dig into, because what were some of the things you had to do to get out of that pit? Someone might be listening now thinking, I feel so stuck in the life that I am living, in the circumstances that I have. I can't even think about pleasure, Lisa. I'm just so stuck in my to-do list, my daily responsibilities. Pleasure is the last thing. That's not going to make me a better mom or a better person. What's going to make me a better mom or better person is more time or more money or more stuff like that. But I know that it takes a shift in your mind first. What were some of the things you did to change that perspective?
I think I was lucky to have stumbled upon this, because you're right. Also, your mind doesn't say, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed, I need some pleasure.
Yeah. Oh, that's a mic drop moment. That should be a meme. That's exactly true. We don't go there. Not at all.
No, instead we go to self-sacrificing even more, and just we try to destroy ourselves to like give every ounce of what we possibly have. So for me, how did I get to this point of pleasure? I spent a lot of time alone during my divorce. And like I hibernated. I didn't do like the go partying. I was in my womb cave, blanket over my head, like, what is this stuff that I'm feeling? And I actually took myself through a ritual, which wasn't like me. I've never been a ritual kind of person until this new me that now it's part of my life. But I read a book. Books are my thing that help me all the time. So I read a book called The Journey to the Dark Goddess. And I took myself through the 7 steps of descent based on Inanna's journey. I know we're going a bit deep, so everyone just hold on. Yes. Essentially, you follow the journey to the dark goddess, to the underworld, which sounds terrifying. But through this book, it explains the whole story of Inanna's descent and takes you step by step through like a ritual of removing aspects of your personality. So as you go through the 7 gates to the underworld, where you will ultimately die and be reborn, sounds so deep.
Love
you
it.
Take off something. Yeah. You take off something that represents something of importance to you. So I would put down something that represented, for me, the most important thing then and now was being a mother. And so I put down symbolically something that represented me as a mother, like I'm giving that up and imagining like the world will still go on. And like it was so deep. And then the next one was a wife. And then I would just go down through the 7 steps and spend as long as I needed, like feeling that pain and grieving and accepting that truth before I moved on. And then only once I got to nothing left, like there's nothing left of me now, and I'm still worthy here at this bottom of nothingness, right? And staying in that pit of despair, literally, and then believing that there's something worth living for, even if you had none of that stuff anymore, and then coming back and reclaiming the parts that you want to reclaim in the way that you want to reclaim them. So that was my personal process. I took 2 days and, literally locked my doors, closed the curtains, gonna do this thing. And through that, part of me that I laid down was my body, my sexuality, me as a sexual woman, because that was something that had caused issues in my marriage, that I wanted to express myself in ways that weren't comfortable in that container of the marriage, right? And so when I reclaimed that aspect, I didn't feel ashamed of her. I didn't feel ashamed of the body that had developed, too early, and, everyone had laughed at me, and like my mum couldn't afford a bra, and like my sexuality and my sexual body had been shameful. And so I reclaimed it fully, and just that was like the new put on the cloak of sexuality. And this time I was like, okay, it fits now.
That is so powerful. And I think we all have these ways. This is one way of going about it. If you look into metaphysics, if you look into psychology, if you look into epigenetics and understanding the mind and how the mind works and all of these things, they always have the same process of unlearning, unraveling that personality so you can create a new personal reality. So whichever modality you follow is perfect, but this is such a beautiful one, especially it's like drenched in the feminine. It's so drenched in the feminine. And I think it can be so healing when you allow yourself to go through that, always being alone, always looking at those aspects that you tie your identity to, letting that go, breaking down the old so that you can just rebuild the new, and keeping the aspects that serve you, but letting go of those that just don't. And however long you take, whether it's 2 days, 2 years, 20 years, going on that journey is always worthwhile. And then getting to a place where you don't feel ashamed of your sexuality. Honey, we need to talk about that, because I cannot imagine that like 10% of the world is fully okay with their sexuality. I can't even imagine that, because it's something that comes up in so many aspects. As a health coach, I see it in people's binge eating, in their suppression of their emotions, in how they restrict, in how they try and control their entire lives. It seeps through everywhere. Why do we have such shame around sexuality, in your opinion? Because I think it's a big question. I understand that. And how can we start unraveling, maybe just choosing another thought in regards to our sexuality today?
It is a huge one, because, and there are so many reasons why we might feel shame. It can come from anywhere, and it can come from nowhere in particular. You might not think you've got a trigger memory that triggered shame, but it can come from messaging as you were growing up. It can come from things you've seen on TV. You might feel ashamed of your body. You might feel ashamed of your sexuality, and maybe you were brought up in a religious culture, or abstinence only education, or you may have grown up with the idea that if you lost your virginity, you're dirty, or that good girls don't do this. All of there's so many different reasons. Or mothers, when you become a mother, then you can no longer be sexual. Or maybe your body makes you, you feel like your body doesn't make you worthy of being sexual. Right. You might feel ashamed around infidelity, whether you actually were the one who committed adultery, or if your partner did. You can still carry shame. There's so many different reasons why we might carry shame. It can be that you think that your vulva looks funny. It can be like so many things. So I don't think many of us escape. I don't think many of us get to adulthood unscathed.
Yeah.
There's going to be some conditioning, some trauma, some abuse, some messaging that has lodged itself in our brains. And the way I like to describe and explain what's going on when it comes to shame is that imagining like different parts of your personality that are coming up. So you have your wounded self who is feeling ashamed. She's been hurt and told that she's wrong or dirty or disgusting, or has learned some way that there's something wrong with her. And then you have your protective self, who is like this mechanism that's there to keep the wounded self in check, to make sure she doesn't get hurt anymore. And she has all of these rules. She's like a security guard, but she's got it wrong. So when you're feeling shame, your wounded self is hurting and your protective self is like shouting at her. So like you're hurting and you're hurt and you're hurting yourself.
Wow.
All at once. That's how I see it.
That's so true. That's so true.
So when you're in the moment, right. So say you're in bed and your partner is like going down on you, for example, right? They're performing oral sex. This is really difficult for so many women who have this idea that they think they're supposed to love it, and yet they cannot tolerate receiving it because it feels it's too much attention, it's too much, of a spotlight on them. And they're feeling like, oh, this feels naughty or bad, or my vulva might taste funny, or, a whole load of different shameful thoughts that might crop up in that moment. Like, I'm not good enough. I don't deserve to receive this. I should be giving, all of those thoughts. So imagine that's happening at that moment. If you can imagine that wounded self, that version of you that's feeling like, oh, this is awkward, I don't like it, and your protective self saying, you should be giving because it's better to give than receive, then send them both love. Like, notice this feeling coming up and like put your hand on your heart. Take a deep breath and just send them love. Like, just say, it's okay. It's okay. I know you're feeling ashamed. I know you feel like we're not worthy. I know address it directly. Whatever your thought was, address it directly. And then just let yourself know that it's okay. You can choose differently now. You can choose. I deserve pleasure. My partner loves pleasuring me. This can feel good. This can feel good if I let it, if I just allow myself to receive.
I think the self-awareness that comes with that, you need to get to a point where you understand what you're thinking, and that every thought that pops into your head isn't necessarily true and doesn't need to stay. It doesn't mean that's who you are. It's not your identity. It's just a thought. But what I want to dig into with what you said now was, what if someone listening is thinking, you know what, Lisa, this sounds great in like some or other movie with some or other hunk, but this is real life. I have bills to pay. I have 3 kids in the house screaming. I don't even know when I'll have time because in the morning it's chaos. In the evening, I'm so tired. I don't even want to think about pleasure. I just want to get through my day. How would you convince someone to start bringing pleasure into their day, and why it's actually so powerful that it's going to help them, not hinder them with the life that they have now?
Great. So first of all, I am really lazy when it comes to pleasure, right? I am equally a busy woman. I have 3 teenage sons homeschooling and, a very demanding husband. and 2 dogs and, you know, my own business. So I do understand. If I had to set time aside for a morning practice, I just wouldn't do it because it would feel like something else on my to-do list. It would feel like something else I've got to get done before I start my day. So I actually don't. I don't, which is like goes against what everyone says who's in the pleasure realm. You know, have morning practice, start your day. I love the idea of it, but I also want to like check my emails and, you know, maybe quickly respond to a couple before my kids wake up. So, and at the end of the day, I also crash in my bed, my eyes. I mean, I've already slept on the couch for 5 minutes, so I'm not going to come to bed now expecting like wild passion.
Yeah.
So what you have to do instead, it's the wrong time. Your body's ready for sleep.
Sure.
So instead, you have to find the moments where pleasure does work. When in your day are you available for pleasure? And you might say, never. I don't have a spare second. But that's okay. That's fine. How can you bring pleasure to things you already do then? How can you increase pleasure by 1% in what you're already doing? Can you sit down and hold your coffee and feel the warmth coming into your hands and smell the aroma and really connect with that coffee? Feel the warmth going down into your stomach and just like reveling in that. Just really enjoying it. It doesn't have to take any extra time or energy. It doesn't. You can sit, say your kids are running around and you've got 2 minutes peace. Well, not peace. You're sitting down for 2 minutes. Your kids are going crazy. They're talking to you, whatever. My kids like talk to you all the time when you've got a 5-second gap. Can you, like, as they're talking, like massage the palm of your hand, you know? Can you like play with your hand or rub your shoulders? Like, how can you bring like another layer of pleasure to your life? I like to call it microdosing pleasure. Like, how can you microdose pleasure? One tiny little snippet of pleasure in what you're already doing. If you've got a long commute, how can you make that pleasurable? Can you put in a beautiful scent in your car? Can you make a great playlist of music? Can you notice the scenery? Can you just enjoy driving or being on public transport? How can you make it more pleasurable? How can you make dinner more pleasurable? Can you plate it beautifully? How can you make your bath time more pleasurable? Can you add some essential oils or a candle? Like, you can do this. It doesn't take any extra time.
Wow.
And now the second half of your question is, why would you bother? Because, you know, we don't feel like we deserve it. We're like, why would we do that for ourselves? Well, the reason is pleasure is energizing. By accessing pleasure, you can actually activate nitric oxide in your system, which like gets all of your endorphins going, and it literally energizes you.
I love the fact that you said that, because with me, I had to go on a whole journey of unlearning all of the guilt and the shame and the this makes you dirty, that makes you wrong, that whole good girl mentality, which blocks women in so many ways. That is a conversation for a whole podcast, just that good girl mentality, keeping women stuck. But what was so amazing with what you said was that pleasure energizes you. And I think it's the same with things like exercise and eating healthy and drinking a lot of water and things like that. We think it's a burden. We think it's another thing for us to do, but it's not. It's something that will enhance all of what you're doing at the moment. So those tiny bits of pleasure throughout your day will make you feel lighter. It will kind of expand time. It has the ability to make your mind more clear, so you'll make better decisions, so you'll go through your to-do list quicker. But now I've got a question for those women that are really starting to think, okay, Lisa, that sounds great. I can start doing a couple of those things. But they've got this to-do list mentality. And a lot of women even put pleasure, whether it's self-pleasure or pleasure with a partner, on their to-do list as well. It's this rigid thing that just needs to get done, and sometimes I have to do it, but it doesn't feel like something that is inspired. It doesn't feel like something that comes naturally. There are a lot of people that says, just put it on your to-do list. When you do it, you'll feel inspired. And then there are other people that just says, no, that's just strange. I can't do that. I don't want to do something that's just on my to-do list. What is your best advice for those two scenarios?
Yeah, I like that. I like the way you put that. So if you're doing it just because you feel like you should do it, then yeah, I think that you don't get the same amount of pleasure from it. If you're feeling like you should do it, then it's not going to give you the same benefits. So when you're actually doing it for the sake of it, and because it feels good, and because it helps you get into your body, then it is revitalizing. Like it's almost like your personal plug-in to pleasure, right? To a pleasure energy source. It's like you're a phone charger. You plug it in, you allow yourself to fill up. But like you say, that only happens if you're not doing it from a place of, I should. You're doing it because you know that you deserve it.
Wow.
And because you know that once you do, it is like filling your cup. Like you said, we feel like all of these things are another chore on our to-do list.
Yeah.
It's crazy because our bodies are the vessels that we are here on this planet with. And it shouldn't be a chore to help them run smoothly. And when they do, our life is just elevated to such an extreme level. And our bodies are made to experience pleasure. They are covered in this exquisitely sensitive skin and with all of these nerve endings that just, they are designed for pleasure. And it's like a natural feedback loop. When you make yourself feel good, you want to feel better. Like it keeps on coming. It feels good, so you do more of it. It feels better. Like it's a delicious feedback loop that just feeds you and it revitalizes you. Like it allows you to tap into that energy source that you can create.
Yeah.
You know, sexual energy is life force energy. It is creative energy that you can use in any aspect of your life, in any area of your life.
With what you were saying now, I just want to dig into what are the things that block pleasure from us? Because so many times we just focus on creating more pleasure in our lives. But I've noticed in my own life, I can create my day in a way that I don't, like I literally block pleasure. I can be so in my masculine where being in my feminine is the last thing that I can get to in a quick bath or just one thing. What are some of the things we do that blocks pleasure in our lives?
Yeah, that we do block pleasure. There's no doubt about it. And I think one of the things is that we really prioritize our mind. And as you said, the masculine. If you think about when we were young girls and we are sat in school, you're sat at your desk, gazing out of the window and you can see the meadow and you just want to be running in the meadow with your hair running free. But no, you're sat at your desk, you know, you're listening to the teacher, you're being quiet, and no, you cannot go to the toilet now because you have to wait till break time. Like we are trained to ignore our body's needs from a very young age and to prioritize our mind above everything else. So that becomes our default. I'm guilty of it, that I sit at my desk and I'm working and I'm ignoring the ache in my shoulders. I'm ignoring the fact that I need to go and do a wee.
Yeah. Or that you're hungry, or that you're tired. We ignore all of those little cues.
Exactly.
Yes.
And our body is talking to us. So number one is that we just tune out. We forget to listen to our bodies. And our bodies actually, in all of the body communication that goes on in our whole entire system, 80% of signals go from the body to the brain and 20% go from the brain to the body. So the body is talking all of the time, but we don't listen to it. So that's how we can ignore pleasure. That's one of the ways. And another way that we block it out is by not feeling safe in our body. So when our body is feeling panicked for some reason, we just literally cannot access the pleasure in our body. So, and the reason your body might feel unsafe is so many reasons, apart from like trauma that's unprocessed and ways that we learned to respond to situations as a child. So you might have learned, for example, say you were a child who had a very angry father. You might have learned that you couldn't stand up to your father and you couldn't run away. So instead, you learn to be really quiet or like a really good girl. And so those responses, you carry them through to adulthood if you don't unpack them. So that when a situation occurs, like for example, you might get a stern email from a colleague, and instead of dealing with it with assertiveness, you go back to your freeze response and you don't do anything, or you try to be overly nice to overcompensate, right? And what you're doing is you're triggering your sympathetic nervous system. You're feeling afraid in a situation where fear maybe isn't, the right response, but you naturally feel afraid, and your response isn't helpful because that's just the way you've learned it's safe to respond. So if you find yourself doing things like that in life, where you can't stand up for yourself, where your natural instincts are to just be quiet and not move or be nice, then it's going to be very hard for you to access the pleasure in your body because your autonomic nervous system is switched on to stress.
Oh, I so relate.
It's very,
yeah,
it makes sense that we would feel stress. Our lives are stressful. We live with a low-level fear all the time.
Yeah.
Or anxiety. You could call it anxiety. You could call it worry. You could call it just, your to-do list on repeat all the time, worrying that you're going to miss something, or, someone will judge you for it. So whatever your reason, it's likely that you're carrying this feeling of unsafety in your body. And while that's happening, you cannot access pleasure. But your body wants to be safe above all else. Your body is designed to keep you safe above everything else. We know that from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You need to feel safe and secure. You can teach yourself to feel safe by doing some simple things. And one I know that you talk about, Melissa, is moving your body. Moving your body helps you to actually complete the stress cycle so that you're letting your body know it's okay. So you see, like when zebras are being chased down by a lion, the minute they escape, they escape and they're alive, their body does an enormous full body shake.
Yeah.
They're like completing the stress cycle. They're just kind of resetting their nervous system. Like, it's okay. And we humans would do that if we didn't think it looked weird.
Yes.
Right? If we allowed, we don't do it because that's not what we think we should be doing, but our bodies know what to do. Your body knows what to do. If you have a massive surge of adrenaline, then go and have a big tantrum on your bed afterwards, bang your fists on the bed, or go for a run or dance. Some kind of movements just help your nervous system know you're okay, because telling your body that it's okay now, we're safe, is not enough.
Yeah.
You can't tell your body you're safe. You need to show your body. So you can do that with pleasure. You can do that with sexual pleasure. Some people, we experienced unrest in South Africa recently, and some people found that their sex drive went through the roof and they didn't understand why. And it is because it's a natural way some people's bodies like to get rid of that nervous tension.
Wow.
It's a natural way. Sex is a way to complete that stress cycle too. Plus it gives you a boost of endorphins and helps you get embodied again. Like, it's okay. We are okay.
It is. And I always think when it comes to your sexuality, it's one of those beautiful things that's such a link between your spiritual side and your body. And you need to honor both. You need to understand that you are a physical being, and that there are certain ways that your hormones and your nervous system and things affect how you feel. It's not just all in the mind. It's not. It really is a physical thing as well. And taking care of your body, making your body feel safe, understanding your body, giving it the type of food that will give it energy, that will balance the hormones. We are like this little chemical soup that we think is just mind, but it's not. This body has a lot to do with how you feel and what you'll want to experience in this world. So it's that beautiful balance between the two. But I want to ask you this question, which I've gotten from one of my clients as well. And I just thought, I need Lisa in that moment when she asked me this. Does pleasure start with a partner? Does pleasure start with you?
Ooh, pleasure starts with you. I'm sure of it. Although, there's a lot of facets to this question. So I think if you are not able to have safety in your body, I would just say this. Ultimately, you need to feel safe in your body if you want to experience pleasure, full stop. And that often is easier to establish when you're alone. Because when you're alone, you don't have the extra judgment or worry that your partner is judging you, or how they're going to react to your naked body or your sexual expression, how you sound, what your face looks like. You know, how so many of my clients are embarrassed to make sound during sex, or embarrassed to do certain positions because of how they look. That is going to impact how much pleasure they can receive.
Sure.
That fear and shame, right? So that's why I believe it starts with you, because when you are alone, you don't have that added layer of self-doubt, right? And that said, there can be some situations in partnerships where a partner can make you feel so safe, and their energy can help you to feel really at home, and they can almost help you to come home to your body. So in some situations, it really, really does help to have a partner present too, and they can almost hold space for you. But not all partners are able to do that. But if you find yourself after sex, if you find yourself crying, then that is a sign that your partner does make you feel safe.
Wow.
Bizarrely. Because if you cry, then it shows that you have released something, and that your body feels safe enough to release maybe something that has been stored, or just to express in a natural way without judgment. Because sometimes we feel embarrassed. If you cry after sex, you can think, oh my goodness, what went wrong? No, nothing has gone wrong. That shows something really right.
Oh, that's beautiful.
In my opinion.
Wow, yes, and people don't look at it that way. I'm so glad that you clarified that. And what do you do if your partner, if you're on this healing journey and you want to allow more pleasure into your life, and you want to embody that more, and you want to have that experience with your partner, but they're kind of shut down. They're kind of traditional and still shut down, and in that whole really strange masculine place where it's not about the pleasure throughout the day, you know, that whole scenario where the one wants to change, wants to bring pleasure into the container, like you said earlier, and the other one doesn't, or there's resistance. How do you navigate a situation like that?
I really think it's all down to you and what you do and what you choose to bring, right? Your partner doesn't have to be on board to still you can still make an impact on yourself and the container. Yeah, absolutely. Your sexuality and your relationship with yourself sexually is up to you. Right? Your relationship with yourself regarding pleasure is up to you. You can bring your pleasurable self, your most fully present self, to the bedroom. Your partner is going to get so much benefit from that they don't have to be actively knowing that you're doing that, right? They don't have to do anything different. You just have to show up with your full presence and be fully immersed in the pleasure. And that's something you learn over time. And that's tools that you gradually pick up in your development of your relationship with yourself, and it will naturally come to the container as well.
I know that that's one of the things that holds a lot of women back that I've spoken with as well. They're like, I want to change. I want to bring pleasure into my life. I want to change the dynamic in our sexual container, but they don't. The last question on this trail of thought that I have for you is body image and confidence with the body that you've got. Because I know a lot of us struggle with that. And that is fully clothed in situations where we aren't as vulnerable as when we are with someone or when pleasure is involved. How do we overcome that barrier that our body image can keep us from experiencing the pleasure we deserve?
Yes, it really can. The way we feel about our bodies has a huge impact on the pleasure we can experience. But the way our body looks has no impact on the pleasure at all. So for this, I really encourage your listeners to think about how they can change their relationship with their body so that they can choose to experience pleasure, even if they don't feel like their body is worthy of it. It is just a shift. It's a big one. And one way that you can kind of get there is by working in front of the mirror. What I mean is spending time in front of the mirror, fully dressed or naked if they can, taking time, putting on moisturizer, massaging your body in front of a mirror, and even pleasuring in front of a mirror. That's an edge for a lot of people. But if you're able to do that over time and with practice, you can start to witness yourself in all of your glory, with all of your bumps and lumps and cellulite and scars, all of the things that you struggle to accept. When you just see yourself as you are, and over time, you will see yourself beyond just the reflection and the bits you hate. You'll just see yourself as a woman enjoying her body, and a woman experiencing pleasure, and a woman who's treating her body with respect, no matter how it looks.
Wow.
And it just helps you to show up more confidently because you have already owned it. You have already seen it. You have accepted it in a way. The mirror work is very powerful for this.
It's so vulnerable. I think that's the thing. Mirror work is always so vulnerable, and we don't do it. And I always think back on the quote that says, you can never see your own beauty. All you ever see of yourself is your own reflection. You've never really seen yourself. You've only seen reflections of you that is encased in all of your issues, all of your perceptions about yourself. And those tiny things make you so beautifully human. I mean, we're all so beautifully human. And it's a shame that our humanness keeps us from experiencing something that is so just profound here on earth. We are sensory beings. This is what we were made for. And I love that. I love that everyone can take ownership of their own experience when it comes to pleasure. But Lisa, I've got another question for you. And I want you to think back to when you were 20 years old and see 20-year-old Lisa in front of you and exactly where she was then, the life experience she's had. What is one piece of advice that you would give your old self today?
Wow. She had no idea what she was in for.
I love that.
She would be so proud. I think she would be so proud. I would tell her to trust herself. Like, just trust yourself, follow your dreams, because she did. I would just want to give her reassurance because nobody else could at that point. And I would just tell her, you're going to be okay. Believe in yourself.
And that has so much to do with pleasure and confidence as well. Trusting yourself. Trusting yourself.
Definitely.
So it's all so beautifully linked. But Lisa, before I ask you the last question, I just want to take a moment to just acknowledge you for the light that you are, not only on social media, but in so many people's lives. And to do the work yourself, to have gone through that journey, like you said, that book's title, The Journey to the Dark Goddess, just to have gone through that journey yourself, to have gone through the divorce and have moved and have reinvented yourself in such a profound way. That is hard work and it's the best work. But you did that so that the rest of us can look at you and say, oh, she makes these things seem fun. I'm allowed to feel pleasure. I'm allowed to let all of this good stuff into my life. I am deserving. So thank you for your journey. Thank you for being such a light. Thank you for bringing that option to us, because we can't be what we've never seen. And you are such a beautiful embodiment of what is possible when you own your pleasure, where you allow yourself to experience these things that make us so beautifully human. So thank you so much for that, Lisa.
Wow, thank you. Oh, I'm speechless. That was so kind. Thank you very much.
It's all true. So now I want to ask you our last question for the audience. What is one thing that we can do to live our everyday lives better?
Touch your body.
Yes.
Touch your body. Yes, just touch your body. I don't just mean self-pleasure. I just mean give yourself a hug, stroke yourself. Take time if you're putting on moisturizer. For example, I had a client recently who we were talking about how she handled a tricky situation. And she was saying, she gives herself a hug. And then she said, well, not literally. And I said, why not? Why can't you give yourself a hug? If you give yourself a hug literally, it feels good. It feels good. You're being there. You're giving the support. You're receiving the support. You are your own best friend, and you can provide a really loving and accepting experience for yourself. So touch your body. It deserves it. It craves it. Give it the attention. That is my number one tip.
That's beautiful. I love that. I'm going to adopt that from today. I'm definitely going to be doing that more. Lisa, thank you so much for your wisdom. I can't wait to have you on the LifeKraft podcast again. I know this has sparked a lot in our listeners because there were so many facets to this, and it's such a profound subject to talk about. And I love that we can talk about it and that you bring so much light to the subject. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Melissa. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Hi, it's Lisa Welsh here, and I want to tell you a little more about the 7-Day Pleasure Plan. This is an audio course designed for really busy women. I made it so that it will slide seamlessly into your hectic day and give you tools to help you feel like the old you again. Remember her? This is honestly the easiest way to revive your boring love life, overcome exhaustion and resentment, and feel liberated. You don't need to do anything more than just press play and listen while I walk you through 7 easily digestible audio lessons so you can carry on with your day. I'll guide you through each lesson and their inbuilt practices with zero fluff, and together we will unpack common obstacles and empower you with tools you need to access your full pleasure potential.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode and taking the time to invest in yourself and in your future. If you loved this episode, be sure to share it with us by leaving a positive review or tagging us in a post or in your stories. Share one thing that stood out or inspired you to live your everyday life better. This helps us create more meaningful episodes for you to enjoy. If you're not already following us on social media, be sure to follow @LifeKraft for more inspiration and tools to help you live your most powerful life. And remember, you always have the power to craft a better life for yourself, and we are here to help you do just that. We'll connect again in the next episode, and until then, keep creating a life that you're excited to wake up to. We enjoy bringing you interviews from experts and everyday people so that they can talk about their experiences and share information, tips, and what has worked for them on their journey towards a better life. However, remember that the opinions or advice of our guests and myself, the host, should not be taken as personal, actionable advice and is given as general information and education only. Please always remember to consult a qualified professional before implementing any medical, financial, legal, or other advice that you believe might work for you. LifeKraft is not responsible nor liable for your decision when implementing anything you hear on the podcast. Please listen and act responsibly. The opinions of our guests do not represent the opinions or views of LifeKraft or Melissa Lane personally and are meant as information and general education only. Education only. Education only. Education only.